Hey folks, hope you're doing good today. We've got an album review for you here. This is for a band called Universe in My Yard. I haven't actually listened to a lot of their stuff. They are in the queue to be on the show with some kind of other progressive deathcore modern death bands. But they sent me a message and said, look, we've put a new album out. If you'd like to do an album review for us and check out the tracks, we'd love to hear what you've got to say about them. Well, it's about half an hour long. I've got half an hour to listen to some death metal. So yeah, we're going to get this one done and check it out. I've got a bit of information about these guys. It says they're a progressive deathcore band from Bologna, Italy. They're founded in 2011. There's 4 of them in the band now. And I looked at their video because they did a kind of one of those quarantine videos. And it does seem that they use MIDI drums, so there's no drummer in the band at the moment by the sound of things. I'm not sure if that's going to change at any time in the near future or not. So yeah, they've done all of the work themselves. They've recorded and mastered it and all of that themselves. So that's really cool, and we can talk about that stuff. And yeah, we're just going to check it out, see what it sounds like, talk about it as we do, and try and enjoy it as best we can. So this first track, I've got some stuff for us to look at on the screen. They sent me some pictures, so we'll put that up so you've got something else to look at as well. But we're going to get straight into the first track. This one's called Worldwide Addiction. It's just less than 2 minutes long, so let's see what it sounds like. Messing about with the dials on the delay. Sounds nice. Nice big sound. That sounds good. Now, I'm guessing that's just obviously a warm-up track to get us straight into this, so I'll keep it going. This is number 2, Isolating Veil. Here we go. Nice guitar tone. It's got that bubbly kind of PV sound. Nice and fat. It's a good bassy low end to it. You can see that in the waveform. They've got a good fat low end. Drums sound nice and weighty. Kick through the mix nicely. Yeah, a lot of low end to the guitar tone and a fat bass tone as well. That's why it looks so fat down there. They've got a good wide sound, it's panned out nicely. Bringing in that progressive edge. Cool vocal. It's got a nice place in his throat to sit in. Got a good gravel in there. Vocals recorded quite clean. I don't think they've put a lot of distortion and stuff on his vocal. Remember, they recorded and mixed all of this themselves, so we can talk about all of that stuff as well. Nice drumming, bit of ghost notes. So they've obviously, with the drumming, programmed the MIDI, or maybe got someone to play the MIDI. You can do that nowadays. But it sounds very natural. You wouldn't know straight away that it's kind of MIDI drums. Doesn't sound like it's a computer. They've obviously worked with all the velocities and all of that stuff to humanize the sound of the MIDI. And make MIDI drums sound very, very realistic, to where only someone really paying attention is going to notice the difference. These guys have done that, I would say. These are drums. It sounds human. Got a good kit. I don't know what kit they're using. But the drums sound good. And the way they've set them up in the MIDI, it sounds natural and humanized. Because I was wondering about that with this band. Because, you know, death metal's a lot about the drumming. And it's very fast drumming, and particularly with fast drumming, you know, that's where it can really start to sound like it's a robot. But no, done a good job. Love the sound bass of this sound of the bass when it cuts through the mix. Nice. I think we're starting to get a flavour of this band then, in terms of being death metal but bringing in progressive edges, because we definitely got that in there. Nice fat guitar tone, big low end to it, good bass tone, and there's parts in there where the bass does a bit of a run, and you can, you know, it catches your ear, other than it just being kind of supporting the low end of the guitars. And I've said a lot about the drums already, but yeah, the drums sound good. I like the sound of the drums, whatever program it is they're using to do that, or if they're triggering samples or whatever it is, it sounds good. And they've done a good job in the MIDI kind of programming, in terms of making it humanized, dealing with the velocities, because it's all about the velocities and how hard you hit the drums, and the kind of offsets to the beat, and a bit of swing and all of that kind of stuff. That's how you make it sound humanized. And these guys have done a good job, particularly in this kind of music where the drums are really very, very important. Now we'll move on to this next track. This is number 3, Storm of Souls. Let's check it out. C, the waveform, big fat low end. Getting that progressiveness again as well, bit of gentiness. That was a mix up. This guy's got a good sound. Yeah. Got a good chub to it. Yeah, a nice groove to him as well. Those kind of harmonics, they sound a bit like Machine Head from back in the day. Some nice changes, moving the energy about. Yeah, this one's heavy. And a bit of vocal mix in there. Yeah, that one was heavy. Nice energy in that one. They moved the energy about nicely in a few different ways as well, a few different grooves to get into. But yeah, for the most part, pumping and punching you in the face. Talking about the drums in this one, I felt that the drums were a bit louder in this one. And I think that added to the kind of punchiness of them all. But maybe a tad too loud, just slightly on this one. But it's, as I say, it adds to the punchiness of the track still. So that's just me nitpicking. This track's number 4. This one's called Meaningless Gaze. They got some good names, so let's check it out. We've got a bit of synth in this one. I was thinking in the last track, it'd be cool if these guys brought in a bit of synth on a few bits, added a bit of atmosphere. Because it is quite... It's not a lot of wash to the music. It's very direct music, you know. It's got that guitar tone that's very... It's not very tight, but it's tight. And it's very punchy and thick. It comes in blocks. And the drums are very punchy. And just to add a bit more wash, because we've got the cymbals and stuff, but yeah, to add a bit of synth wash and atmosphere, because they got that progressive edge to them, would be a nice element to bring into the music, I think. The vocalist is working in a bit of a different way on this one. Got a bit more energy in the vocal, more shouty than kind of gutturals. Sounds good. Cool. Always hear the bass nicely in the mix. One thing I'll say they've done well in the mix is the bass. It's got a good fat low end, but you can also hear the bass tone over the guitars, and the guitars, as I say, are really fat as well. So they've made space for the tone of the bass, even in all of that noise of the guitar, which is a good job. I'm always going on about that on my show. Yeah, this one's got a different vibe. We've had a different mix each track. Every track hasn't sounded the same so far. different energy and a different groove to each one, bringing in a bit more or less depth and progressive elements. We've had the synth as well in this one, which I appreciate, because I was thinking that to bring in some synth to this music. If you do it right, it's a good idea. Now on this part now, it brings a bit of width to it. It's got a good width to it anyway. Brings in a bit of atmosphere, brings in a vibe. It just goes well with those more progressive parts of the music. They've done more with the vocal in this one as well, which is cool. They bring in some wild changes now and again, catch you off guard. Yeah, that was a nice one. That had a lot more to it than the other tracks so far in terms of depth and layering and things to catch your ear. And for people like me who like to deconstruct the music and listen to each element of the band, you know, one second I'm listening out for the guitar, then I'm listening out for the bass and the drums and whatever. And then whenever they do something that catches my ear and catches my attention, you know, that's kind of another tick on my box, on my list, I should say, of just cool things that you can do. Because when you catch someone's ear, especially a musician with a nice drum roll, a ting on the ride, a cool riff, a squeal, a harmonic, just something cool, some out the ordinary. You know, those are the cool little parts that catch your attention. And this one had more of those parts than the other two tracks or three tracks that we've heard so far, because they brought in the synth on this one, which was good. That's a good choice. Hopefully we see that in the rest of the tracks that we've got going on. They did more mix up with the vocal style. We had the gutturals in there, but we had some more shouty and more kind of more higher energy parts, more faster, more rapid, higher syllable parts. And then they did some other parts there towards the end with a different style of vocal and things like that. So that's moving that around as well, which is all interesting. Very, very good. So we'll keep it going. This next track is called Learn to Love the Leash. They got some good names. This is number 5, so let's check it out. Nice. Yeah, I think they could have got away with maybe either slightly lowering the volume of the kick and the snare, or slightly upping the volume of the cymbals to add more wash to the music. Unless that's not what they go for. I'm just someone, yeah, this is my personal taste. I'm someone who likes to always have some wash in their music, like we've got now with this washy cymbal. That sounds great to me. And I always like to have the kind of juxtaposition in metal music, as long as it works, of having kind of punchiness along with washiness as well, trying to blend those two together. And these guys have got all the punchiness that you need. Because I'm someone who likes a bit of wash in their music as well, yeah, they've got some good parts. When the cymbals are going nicely, it's got a good wash to it. But I'm someone who likes to just wash it out. That's why I thought it'd be cool if they bring in some more swashy synths and kind of atmospheric synths to the music, because the guitars and the drums and the bass and the vocal, it's all very punchy, it's very direct. You know, it's like punches to the face. And every so often you want someone to just caress your face and then give you a slap again, you know? That's the way I'm kind of trying to put it across. This one's heavy again. Got some nice riffage on the guitars, and they move it, you know, they kind of got the deathy stuff, but then they pull it out of that, pull it into this kind of interesting riffs, almost a bit genty. I wouldn't say the guitar tone's particularly genty, it's not super tight, which gent is all about. But it's got the kind of riffage you get in gent, the kind of progressive side of gent, which is cool. And then they bring in these more kind of stuff you've heard before, fat, deathy sounds, gutturals. And then they pull it back out into this kind of more modern stuff, riffage. And I say every so often the bass catches your ear going no 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 no. It just sounds super cool. I love that. Yeah, see now we've got a nice wash from the cymbal in this part. So we've got the kind of punchiness, the gentiness of the riffs and the drums, with a nice high-end wash as well, which in my opinion just balances out that whole vibe and that whole sound. Yeah. Good. That sounded great. Well, we're just going to keep it going. I think I'm waffling on enough in the tracks to not need to say too much in between. This one is called 12 Years Delay, track number 6. Here we go. So I'm talking about with the bass. It's got a nice tone. And when it does a bit of a riff separate to the guitars, it catches your ear because you can hear its tone within the mix separate to the guitars. Cool. Good drumming in this one. Yeah. They spent their time in the MIDI kind of table doing these drums. Because that's the thing with MIDI drums, especially with death metal. Setting all those velocities up, humanizing it, and even just writing the drum beats takes a long time. It's much quicker if you've got an E-kit and someone who can play drums like that. Or if you just use grooves or something like that. But when you're writing this progressive stuff that involves the drums going along with the guitars, they're very locked in together and matched. It's all by hand. It takes a long time. Now I will say, so far, because this part's just reminded me of it, because this is kind of the most atmospheric part we've had in this album so far. These guys are pretty heavy. They're not breaking it down. They're not kind of pulling it into ambient parts and more atmospheric parts. These guys are pumping. They're loud and heavy. Even their more progressive parts are still heavy and direct and punching. Just as I say that. This one's a nice one. This has got more edges to it. Some nice guitar in as well. This was the experimental track by the sound of things, but it's worked out very nicely. I like that they've brought in all these extra edges. Just as I was saying, these guys are pure heavy. They've got, no we're not. We've got jazz and all sorts in us, don't worry about it. This one's quite different to their other tracks. Still got a good bit of chug in there though. Some nice parts in this track. We've moved it about a lot. We've had a bunch of different vibes, a bunch of different kind of riffage. Some blast. Yeah. Some nice rocky parts in this one. There's some jazzy parts. Broke it down in a bunch of different ways. You know, if we just heard this one track and we hadn't heard the other ones, you'd think they were a different kind of band to what they are in the other songs. Because this isn't very deathy, you know? But it sounds great. I like the way that they've moved it about. It's more experimental. It's a bit more unique in that way because you don't know what to expect, you don't know what's coming next. Yeah, this one's got a lot of different energy changes in it. It's a long track as well, we're going over 6 minutes now. Dope. Well, that one was quite different compared to the rest of the tracks that we've heard. Very progressive. You know, kind of trying out all sorts in there. Jazz, rock, smooth rock, guitar solos, death within the vocal and stuff like that. Still some chunky, chuggy parts. But really quite a different track to the rest of the tracks. So yeah, that's interesting. Each track has been different in a way. I think that the second and maybe the fifth track were the more heavier tracks, and that's why I was saying these guys are non-stop heavy, because you know, there was a lot of direct music in that up until this track. And what I mean by that is it was all of that genty, tight, punchy, the snare and the kick locked in with the guitars and doing that kind of riffage. And it was all very loud and heavy up until this point. And then this one totally broke out in a different way. Now, I'm not sure if this one's an older track, maybe, or maybe this is a newer track, and this is the direction they're more heading with the band. Because I think this album has been written over a period of time, 1 or 2 years or something like that. And over that period of time, when you start an album and then it doesn't get finished till a year later, you can have changed your styles, you can have changed your vibes and all sorts in that time. So, the start of the album might not sound like the end of the album if that's how it's kind of laid out. So yeah, I'm not sure whether this is just a one-off track for these kind of guys and they thought, hey, we're going to really experiment in this track and think outside the box for the band, or whether this is a way that they're moving with the band, because I would say that this track compared to the other tracks seems more thought out in terms of the riffage. There was some really quite complicated parts in this track, and you don't just knock those out. Those are the kind of riffs that you plan out in Guitar Pro and think about, and you've got a bit of theory knowledge and you apply all of that to it, then you learn how to play it and get it up to speed, then you record it. It's one of those kind of riffs. It's not just something you knock out in a jam session, these kind of track. So I think they've put a bit more time and effort into this one compared to the other tracks, especially as well with programming all the drums and everything, because there was a lot more drumming going on in this track as well. So I'm going to guess this is one of their more modern ones, or maybe a direction they're moving with the band. But let's keep it going. This is track 7. We're getting to the final. One more after this. It's an 8-track album. This one's called Kempete, I think. So let's check it out. Heavy. Nice bit of guitar in there. Nice. This guy's a good guitarist. Got some nice riffs, some nice grooves. That modern, progressive riffage. Bass sounds great as well. Catches your ear often enough for you to, keep reminding you that it's there, and it's not just kind of the low end of the music. It's actually doing stuff and catching your ears. This one's got some nice guitar parts in it. they've done a good job on the drums. The parts like this, if you haven't messed with the velocity and made it sound humanized, it doesn't sound like this at all. This sounds natural. Very nice. That bass has got a great tone. This one's been pretty progressive all the way through. So they've brought us a different flavour in every track. No two tracks are quite the same. For the most part, they've got a nice mixture of progressive, modern gentiness. It's not quite gent because it's not a gent guitar tone, but it's a gent kind of riff. Nice bit of reverby tremolo stuff here, I love that. Do that in every track and I'll love it. But yeah, a bunch of different edges to this band. It's all modern. I wouldn't say they've got very much of an old school edge to them. The only older stuff is the death metal side to them. But everything else is modern, the mix is modern, the guitar tone's pretty modern, the riffage is very modern, drums sound modern because they're nice and clear and punch through the mix. That was a nice one. I say every track's been a bit different, so you can enjoy it in a different way. After the first track, I said, okay, we're starting to get a vibe of this band. They've got some death to them. They've got some progressive side to them, which they said in their blurb about them all. But since then, we've gone on quite a journey. So this is it. This is the last track of our journey, and this one is called Imagine Your Life as a Palindrome. So let's check this one out. Palindrome, sorry. Riffing out. Nice drumming. Yeah. Great guitarists in this band. I like their style, I like their riffage, I like their tone. It's very cool. Yeah, it's cool. Nice. Nice. This one's a good one. Lots going on in the drums. Loads of riffage on the guitars. Choppy vocals. Here we go. sound. So you can put reverby tremolo riffs in any track. I'll dig it. It's in every single piece of my music that I write. I just think it sounds great. Yeah, there's some nice guitar tones in this one. Bass sits nicely in there as well, driving the music. These guys, notice now that they do have large parts with no vocal and it's quite instrumental, and that's cool. I mean, it carries the guitar in, I would say carries it, because the guitar is very interesting. Some great riffage. This interesting riffage is kind of stuff like that came along just at the right time. Stuff that catches your ears, stuff that's interesting to listen to, riffy. Interesting use of arpeggios and kind of going about the scales, kind of that random notage kind of sounding stuff, which is that progressive side, jazzy. It's very cool. So when they drop out the vocal, it's not like the start of the music is missing anything, because they bring in some interesting guitars instead. Very cool. You know, this, when the vocal drops out, it's because the guitar is going to do something cool. With that bass catching our ears again. And there you go. That's the end of it. That is the album Holographic Sight. Just came out by the band Universe in My Yard. And I'd say I'm a fan of these bands after this band after checking them out now, because I've enjoyed that very much. It's been a good kind of half an hour of music, and a good. I've got a great deal to talk about it as well, because they brought us a different vibe with every track. By the end of the album, you got to know their styles. I wouldn't say style, because they've got a bunch of styles. They've got that deathiness. They've got that great riffy, progressive, almost genty, but not genty tone, genty riffage guitar in. They've got good punchy drums that punch through the mix very well. They've got a great bass tone, and it's some really nice sections where the bass catches your ear doing a run separate to the guitars. But all what it does the whole time is it always gives a fat low end and bassy, sub-bassy sound to the music, which works well in my opinion. These guys had a fat sound because of that, because the guitar tone was fat, the bass tone was fat, but it also sat in a separate place to the mix. So not only did the bass give a fatness to the guitars and the whole low end of the guitar side of the music, but it had its own separate tone so you could hear what it was actually doing. I've said it a million times on this channel. For me, that's the perfect balance with a bass. When it's got a good low end, it supports the guitars nicely, meshes in with the tone of the guitars, but also has its own tone in the kind of mids and the high end of it, where you can hear it slapping the fretboard, you can hear it catching the frets, you can just hear whether it's a finger style or whether they're using a pick, whether it's a fretless bass or something like that. So yeah, I'm not sure these guys that used a fretless bass, but they definitely could do in this music. This is a kind of music and sound that I think a fretless bass doing some of those runs would catch your ear even more. It's just got that cool sound a fretless bass has, one 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 kind of thing. So yeah, if they can get their hands on a fretless bass and the bass player's into the idea of it, I'd say check that out, guys, because that would be a nice addition to this sound. Now, some kind of overall thoughts that I've thought as we've kind of gone through the whole album, just to sum a few things up, to kind of not give a constructive criticism, because I hate that term anyway, but just kind of things, I mix my own music. I've mixed music for other people as well. So I listen to music with a mixer's ear, and I deconstruct the music and try and kind of figure out how these guys have made this music, how they've mixed it, what they've tried to put across. And I think they've done a very good job, because you've got to remember, they've done this all themselves. They've recorded it themselves, which is a mission. And they've also mixed it and mastered it themselves, which is another mission on top. And I think they've done a very, very good job of that for the most part. Things that stood out to me that I would have fixed if it was my mix, if they'd sent me these files and gone, can you master it, or can you do us the mix? I would have slightly turned down the volume of the snare drum, because I do feel that was just a bit too loud throughout pretty much every track. It was nice and punchy, had a great sound, but it was louder than the kick, and the way it seems to work out best for this kind of music is where your snare and your kick are really about the same levels in terms of volume and punchiness and punching out the mix. Not too loud to where it overtakes the mix. Now, I will say I think the bass drum was with just the right volume and just the right place and punch in the mix, and it had a nice punch to it, even though it had a big fat low end. And when you've got a big fat low end, if you're doing any mixing, to try and get your bass drum to kick through what's already a fat low end from guitar and bass can be a mission. You've got to do some little tricks and stuff to get that to happen. But the bass drum kicked through all that noise nicely, but I feel like the snare was just a bit too loud in comparison to the kick drum and to the overall music, to where it's just a bit too punchy. That's me really nitpicking. I'm talking about the difference of like 0.1, 0.2 decibels in the mix, really fine tuning that snare just so it sits in there perfect. That's what I'm talking about. But it was very, very good. And when we consider there was MIDI drums as well, and all the stuff that I know they've had to do to program those drums to make them sound like that and make them sound natural, and have all those beats and drum rolls and fills and off time bits and all of that stuff, which is a nightmare. If you're just doing a standard 4/4 beat like Lars Ulrich, your MIDI drums are very, very easy to program, and it doesn't take very long. When your drums are as complicated and kind of offbeat and progressive as this band are, and they've got to lock in with all these weird guitar riffs, it takes a long ass time and it's a lot of effort. So I know that these guys have spent a lot of time doing that, and they've done a very good job of it. Very, very cool. Now, the overall tone, sound of the band and the vibe of the band, I enjoyed very much. They had some very heavy bits, and they did bring us in some kind of quite progressive, what was it, the track 12 Years Delay, I think it was, where that was all over the place. We had jazz, we had soft rock, we had kind of melodic guitar solos and all sorts going in that one, and there weren't really any other tracks that were quite like that. This last track as well, I would say, had more dimensions to it, and I think I can see where this band are going to go with their music as they kind of up at each level and go to the next level with each record or track that they're doing. And I think in the end that these guys could end up writing those kind of 7 or 8 minute tracks whereas each track on this album has had a different vibe to it. We've had the heavy stuff, We've had the kind of progressive side and genty stuff. We had the experimental, jazzy, kind of sexy guitar stuff. We had a bit of metalcore kind of stuff as well in there. And I think rather than have those as each individual tracks on an album, what they might end up doing is writing longer tracks and throwing all of that stuff into the one track. That's what I think they could do with it, and I would be very interested to hear it if they did. So the kind of tracks that I'm thinking about is they might kick out the gate with some heavy, deathy stuff. You think, right, these guys are heavy. Then they move it into some more progressive, genty, that all kind of weird riffage stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, well, they got some of this to it. Then they break it right down into like an atmospheric section, bring in some synths and stuff in there as well, have some nice guitar in, have some sexy solo in over the top with some reverb. And you're like, oh, these guys have got a nice side to them. Then kick it back in with some death, then pull us back into some more progressive stuff, and just have a journey like that throughout the whole track of ups and downs, of where you could write an 8-minute track, where you've got, you know, sections of all of those different bits in there, and the track is a real kind of epic journey, each one. You know, bands kind of like Between the Buried and Me, I'm kind of thinking like, I know they've got some really weird tracks and stuff on their albums, but the ones I really like of theirs is where they've got some heavy bits, some real deathy heavy bits, and then it goes all progressive, but then they break it down and it's nice and atmospheric, and there's a break within the music. Then they're building it back up into a crescendo. And I think that's where these guys could go, because they've got all the elements in there. And it's cool to have a different track and a different flavor on each track. But what's also very cool is to have a nice long track with all of those flavors in them, where the track's written as a journey, and it pushes you through all those different vibes and grooves and flavors within the one track. And it just feels satisfying to go from the start to the middle to the end. Very, very cool. Yeah, good band. I enjoyed this band. Universe in My Yard is their name. I hope you've enjoyed this as well. How long have we gone on for? We've gone on for 52 minutes. I apologize for that, because I thought this was going to be about half an hour long. I apologize for that. I don't know how many people are going to get to the end of a 52-minute video, but hopefully people listen to the first few tracks and think, yeah, I'll just keep listening to this because it's cool. Maybe have it on in the background, because I don't expect people to look at my face for 50 minutes. That's ridiculous. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it either way. If you have got to this point, if you've got to this point and you're not a member of this band, fair play to you. You obviously like this band, and you obviously like listening to me gabbering on. And unfortunately, the band are going to have to listen to this, and they'll have to listen to me talking for all this time. Hopefully they enjoy me talking about their music in this way. I'm going to stop now because I've already talked on for way too much. Hope you've enjoyed this, guys. This is a cool band. They're going to be on the show a bit later on with some other similar bands that I've got lined up. But if you like this stuff, go and check them out. This is a brand new album. It's new music. They've done it all themselves. So if it's your thing, go and show them some love. I hope you've enjoyed that, guys. That's going to be it from me. I've spoken for too long already, so I'll see you around. Bye.